Welcome to Teaching Truth. My name is Glenn Cartwright. Over the last couple of days we've been digging beneath the topsoil of Matthew chapter 17, the account of the Transfiguration of Jesus. Going through our study looking at four somethings and four questions that I believe God would wish by His Spirit to challenge us about. And over the last couple of days we've been considering something they saw and asking ourselves the question, are we a large-minded people? And yesterday we considered the second something they heard, and asked ourselves the question, are we a listening people? Not only listening to God through His Word and by His Spirit, but listening to the needs in our society. And today we come to the third something they received. Something they received. See, verse 7 tells us that they received the ministry of Jesus. Now again, to understand what happens in verse 7, again you have to walk backwards into verse 6. You see, what they saw and what they heard struck terror, absolute terror, into them. I mean, put yourself in that situation. It would strike terror into you, wouldn't it? A brilliant and dazzling radiance beaming from Jesus, a reappearance of Moses and Elijah, representing the two great strands of Old Testament theology, the law and the prophets. A bright cloud suddenly coming down and a voice speaking within the cloud. No wonder they were terrified. I mean, who wouldn't be? Now, if you know your Old Testament, you'll know that a cloud was the visible token of God's presence. It was usually a thick, dark cloud that He revealed Himself through. Just read Exodus chapter 19 verse 16 or 1 Kings 8:12. But isn't it interesting here, and note this, that we read of a bright cloud, not a dark one. Speaking not of judgment and consuming fire, but to quote Matthew Henry again, speaking of God's light, love and liberty. So it was not a dark cloud, it was a light cloud where the brilliance of Jesus was seen. And remember what we said the other day with regards to Mount Tabor. It was the mountain on which beacons were lit. Beacons were lit so that surrounding villages could be reminded of the Jewish holy days. This was a place where things were lit, as it were. And Jesus was lit up, as it were, on this mountain. And so it's against this backdrop of this terrifying situation for the disciples that Jesus ministers into the lives of Peter, James and John. And He does so in two ways. One, through what He did, and two, through what He said. You see, they received the ministry of Jesus through what He did. What did He do? Well, it was His touch, a touch of comfort and of strength. But they also received the ministry of Jesus through what He said, His words. Get up. Do not be afraid. Words of assurance and power. And maybe as you're viewing this or listening to this, perhaps right now, you're in a terrifying or a fearful or an anxious or a worrying situation. As it were, a cloud has come down, is enveloping you. You are not sure what's happening. And maybe you just need that gentle, reassuring touch from the Master. And that gentle, reassuring word from the glorified Lord. See, the ministry of Jesus continued as they came down from the mountaintop. Jesus warns them not to tell anyone what they had just experienced. See, Jesus was directing them towards a change in their thinking. We read that from verses 10 through to 13. See, once Jesus had clarified their thinking, as it were, taken away the fog and the cloud of their thinking, once he had ministered to them by his touch and by his words, once they had learned why Jesus was saying what he was saying, then they understood, then the penny dropped, then they got it. And so my question to us today is quite simply this: are we a learning people? Are we open to, as it were, getting it, to the penny dropping? Are we a learning people in that we're open to the ministry of Jesus in how we think and in how we interpret the Word of God and live out the lifestyle by the empowering Spirit of God? See, are we a learning people? Are we committed to learning? Are we a learning people open to being challenged? You see, I believe if we're willing to learn, we are by consequence saying we are willing to be challenged. See, are we a people who are more keen to know the Word of God, and are we spiritually mature enough to allow ourselves to be challenged by that Word? Do we have that spiritual hunger? Are we faithful students, as it were, in the academy of God, listening to, as we reminded ourselves yesterday, listening to and learning from the greatest teacher that ever lived? Are we willing to be challenged by the Word of God, by the truth of that Word, the absolute truth of His Word? See, are we a learning people, not just open to challenge, but open to changed? You see, if we're challenged, the natural consequence of following through on that challenge is a willingness to change. Just like the disciples had their thinking corrected following their experience on that mountain, that unforgettable experience for them. You are the potter. I am the clay. Help me to be willing to let you have your way. Jesus, you are changing me as your Spirit reigns supreme within my heart. Is that the honest admission and prayer from our hearts? Are we willing to be changed, to be more like Jesus? Are we willing, even as churches, to change, to be churches that are more like Jesus? Not change for the sake of change or change to please people, but change because God has said so. I believe in change, but only change directed by the Spirit of God. And are we a learning people, not only open to challenge and not only open to change, but open to commitment? Because if we're a learning people open to being challenged, and as a result open to being changed, the next step in that openness journey, as it were, is commitment. Commitment to serving God and His church. Are we a learning people? That's the question I want to leave with myself and with you today. Are we a learning people? Something they received. They received the ministry of Jesus. And when God by his Spirit speaks to us, we do well to learn and to listen. We do well to allow ourselves to be challenged, to be open to change, and to be those people who would be committed. May we be people who would have that thirst and that quest for learning more of Jesus. May God bless you.